Good evening and welcome to our community conversation with our clergy of New Britain. We welcome you and thank you for engaging with us on our journey for social justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. The Consolidated School District of New Britain is on a journey to ensure that all of our children have the best possible education that they can by looking at systemic racism, by looking at those oppressive behaviors that have prevented our children in our community from striving. So tonight we have a conversation with our clergy. Our moderator, Veronica T. DeLandro, for this evening, is founder of the BTD Consulting Group. BTD Consulting Group is an organization that provides leadership coaching, training, and consulting to nonprofit organizations and boards throughout Connecticut. Prior to starting her consulting firm, she was appointed in 2018 by Congresswoman-elect Joanna Hayes to serve as her district director for the 5th Congressional District. Veronica is an active community volunteer and leader in New Britain. In 2009, she was appointed to serve as commissioner for the City of New Britain's Youth and Family Services. She has served for the Consolidated School District of New Britain's Graduation Odyssey Task Force, a dropout prevention, intervention, and recovery program that targeted 6th and 9th graders in New Britain public schools. In 2017, Veronica was appointed clerk of committees by the Common Council for New Britain. She is also the first African-American woman to be appointed to this position. She has a degree in mass communication from Hampton University and a master's in public administration with a concentration in nonprofit management from the University of Connecticut. We welcome you tonight. Thank you, Veronica.
Thank you, Dr. Sanders, and thank you to Superintendent Sarah for allowing us to have this platform, this conversation. I want to get straight into the conversation by first recognizing and thanking our translators, who you may not see on the screen, but they're very important, Myra Rodriguez and Majda Nasir. And just a little known fact for those of you watching at home, the city of New Britain has 74 countries represented in our community. So it is very important that we do have those who are able to translate this evening, both in Spanish and in Arabic. So we thank them for being here tonight. Just want to share with everyone sort of the layout for today's program. It's an hour-long conversation with our community, with our faith-based community leaders. And so what we'll do is I'll introduce each of the panelists, and then I'll go straight into a question for each of them to ask, and then we'll have some time at the end for Q&A. So what I'll do, just again, for those of you watching at home, today's conversation is about equity. And the dictionary definition of equity is justice according to natural law or rights, freedom from bias or favoritism. Equity is also defined as fairness. And so we're going to do a deep dive about equity in the partnership with faith leaders in the school district. So I first would like to introduce our panelists, starting with Ibrahim Al-Suremi from the Islamic Association of Central Connecticut, Al-Taqwa Mosque. For 10 years, he taught English in Yemen. He considered himself a human rights defender and journalist, someone after my own heart. His undergraduate degree, he holds an undergraduate degree in education, and his master's is in communication. We would like to thank Ibrahim Al-Suremi being here this evening. Next, our next panelist is Reverend. Thank you. Our next panelist is Reverend Gervais Barger. He is the pastor of Peace Missionary Ministries here in New Britain. He is entering in his 8th year as pastor. And looking at his resume, it is clear that he is not only disciplining the congregation in the Word of God, but he is also walking the walk as he feeds the hungry, clothes the naked, and seeks to house the homeless. Pastor Barger is also the president of the Black Ministerial Alliance here in New Britain, which is an organization that is also hard at working in New Britain to champion the cause of those disenfranchised and less fortunate. His motto that he shares quite often is, "No one of us can do everything, but all of us can do something," is very appropriate as we are all integral and important in being the change we desire in others. So thank you, Reverend Barger, for being here this evening. Our next panelist is the Reverend Samuel C. Blanks. He serves as pastor of Spotswood AME Zion Church. He started his ministry at the age of 15 years old and was assigned to his first church at 17. He has pastored in Lisbon, North Carolina, Charlotte, North Carolina, High Point, North Carolina. He is also a member of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated. Pastor Blanks is married to Nicole, and they have 2 children, Corey and Theodore. We'd like to thank Reverend Blanks for being here this evening. Next, our next panelist is the Reverend Jane Rowe. She is pastor of South Church in downtown in New Britain. She previously served in churches in Oakland, California, Rochester, New York, and Farmington, Connecticut. Jane and her husband, the Reverend Ronald Brown, moved to New Britain in 1998 and raised their twin daughters here, who both attended New Britain Public Schools and benefited immensely from the diverse educational environment. South Church has long identified as a church in the heart of the city, for the heart of the city, and is excited to be part of growing partnerships with the faith community, businesses, nonprofits, schools, and government to make New Britain a more vibrant and equitable home for all its residents. So thank you, Reverend Rowe, for being here. And last, but certainly not least, we have the Reverend David Santiago, pastor of Great River Church, formerly known as Triumphant Church. For 24 years, Pastor David has dedicated his ministerial efforts to build a multicultural, multi-ethnic, and multi-generational congregation. After graduating from New Britain High School, Reverend Santiago served in the Army. He earned a bachelor's degree in evangelical and a Master of Divinity degree from Yale University. In addition to working as professional clinical chaplain, and supervisor for the Connecticut Department of Correction, Reverend Santiago is also finishing a doctoral degree at Hartford Seminary, where he's concentrating on building leadership capacity through hero making. So I know we can't hear anyone clapping out, but I'd like those of you watching at home to give a round of applause for these amazing individuals who are serving on our panel today. I am extremely impressed by everyone's resume and the work that you're doing in the community. So we thank each of you for being here this evening. So we're just going to hop right into it. We shared the question earlier with our panelists, and so I'll ask each of you to answer in your own words and with any examples that you like to share. The question is, what do you think the role of churches, mosques, faith communities, and just places of worship should be regarding social justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion? I'll start with that question. There's a follow-up to that, but I first just want to do a deep dive into what do each of you feel is the role of the churches, mosques, faith communities, and places of worship? What should their roles be regarding social justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion? And we'll start with anyone who wants to start first, but actually I'll start with Reverend Santiago. I know what it's like waiting to go last when you're introduced based on the name of the alphabet. So I'll start with you, Reverend Santiago.
First of all, I want to thank you for having me participate in this. It's truly an honor to participate with these distinguished panel members. I greatly appreciate that. In the spirit of full transparency, I want to disclose that I voiced to Dr. Sanders some criticism about the question posed here tonight. And I actually thought that she was going to uninvite me, but she encouraged me to join the journey. And I just want to point out that speaks volumes to Dr. Sanders' passion, integrity, and excellence. And thank you for being such a great role model for all of us here. Before I attempt to answer or give my input on this question, there are 4 observations that I want to make. I think that they're very important. I have all the statistics to back them up. If you need them, please contact me and I'll share them with you. In the interest of time, I'm just going to state them. New Britain is a very culturally diverse city. In fact, last year, Wallet Hub named New Britain as one of the top 100 cities in the nation. In fact, when only considering cultural diversity, New Britain ranks 32 out of all of the cities across the nation. So that's pretty impressive. New Britain is definitely a diverse city. Second, New Britain is a magnet for immigrants. We have a number of first-generation immigrants living in and out of the city of New Britain. Thirdly, our city is generationally diverse. If you consider all of the generations, they're equally, no one generation is bigger than the other. And the fourth observation is that New Britain is very densely populated. In fact, in Connecticut, there's only 3 cities that are more densely populated than New Britain. That is Bridgeport, Hartford, and New Haven. Now, I mention these because if you put all 4 of these factors together in a city our size, what the result is stubborn division, walls erected everywhere. And at first, these walls mean to protect, but eventually they destroy and amplify the ills of social injustice and inequality. More than 50 years ago, quoting his mentor, Dr. Benjamin Mays, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said that the 11 o'clock hour on Sundays is the most segregated hour in America. And it still makes me sick today that this is true, still today, 50, 60 years later. 90% of the time, to speak of a house of worship is to speak of an ethnic group. In Connecticut, houses of worship and ethnic groups are one of the same. And partnerships between insiders is never as productive as partnerships between independent parties that complement each other. So do you know when America is the least segregated? That would be the 11 o'clock hour, Monday through Friday, in our public school systems. Why? Because schools are mandated to be integrated by law. To speak of ethnic houses of worship and the public school system is to speak of night and day, day and night, or to speak of entities that can truly complement one another. The only partnership, in my opinion, capable of impacting the discourse on social justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion is a partnership between the ethnic houses of worship and the Consolidated School District of New Britain. Such a partnership would have the resources to bring down the walls that perpetuate the cycles and systems of social injustice and inequality. And here I stand, willing to be in partnership, a partnership that includes the school district and the ethnic houses of worship. I would love to participate in something like that. And it can't be about how ethnic peoples or houses of worship can partner together. It has to be about how all of us can partner together. The ills of society can be addressed, but only when everyone comes to the table, ready to work and ready to risk if necessary. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Reverend Santiago. I appreciate you, your forthrightness with that, because this is what we want to do. We want to have a truthful, honest conversation with those that the places of worship that you represent in terms of what does equity look like, or what does partnership look like. So I'm going to ask the same question to Reverend Rowe. If you would like to answer that, what is the role of the churches, mosque, and faith community should be regarding social justice, equity, diversion, and diversity, not diversion, and inclusion.
Thank you, Ms. DeLandro, and Dr. Sanders for inviting me to share my thoughts. And I am glad to follow on Reverend Santiago's comments, because I think maybe they will connect somewhat to what you're saying. I believe that one of the keys to building a more just and inclusive society lies in the kinds of relationships that we form. When we choose to associate only with those who think like us and look like us and have the same background as us, it is very easy to fall into the trap of believing that our way is the norm and is better than others. And that leads to discrimination, and it leads to exclusion. And sometimes we even believe that it's righteous and good because we've come to believe that our way is the better way. Churches and other faith communities do often attract people because of their similarities. And as Reverend Santiago has said, we may be drawn to a congregation because people share our ethnic or cultural heritage or our theology, or their families look like our family. And while that's not entirely bad, because people need to feel safe, we need to have our identity affirmed by being with others who share our faith and our culture and our values, there is also a danger that those similarities will foster that kind of discriminatory mindset. So I believe that an important role for faith communities is to foster relationships across the differences that tend to divide people from one another. When we build those kinds of relationships, we grow to understand and appreciate and respect one another's culture and values and religious faith. We come to understand that we're all part of one human family that God created in love and for love. And we become more committed to making society a safe and inclusive environment for everyone. I believe this can begin within a congregation as people reach out to those who aren't in their social circle. I've seen caring relationships form across generations as senior citizens and teenagers show interest in one another's lives or help one another out with homework or yard work. I've known the power of listening to stories of LGBTQ people, stories of exclusion and violence and discrimination, and I have seen how those stories can touch the hearts and change the minds of straight people. Listening to people of color tell their experiences of discrimination, both subtle and overt, has drawn me into a deeper examination of systemic racism and of my own white privilege. The more diverse a congregation, the more opportunities there are to build these relationships within the faith community. But we must reach outside our faith community to build even more diverse relationships. I'm privileged as I serve South Church, which has a long tradition of being home to multiple congregations of different ethnic and theological traditions. In the early 20th century, it was Assyrian, Italian, and Chinese immigrants whom we welcomed to hold their worship services in our building. And some of those later became incorporated into our congregation and made us more diverse. And in the last 4 decades, we have been blessed to have Hispanic and African American congregations call our building home. Currently, Peace Missionary Ministries, Another Chance Church, St. Mark's Episcopal Church, and the Unitarian Universalist Society of New Britain share our address with South Congregational First Baptist Church. Being in the same building has made it easier for us to build relationships with one another. We pray together, at times we worship together, and we serve the community together. And new opportunities to work for justice and inclusion out in the community keep opening up because of these relationships we have been building over the years. Our partnerships have stretched all of us to consider points of view and life experiences very different from our own. And we have grown in respect and love for one another. That is the foundation for building a more just, equitable, and inclusive world.
Thank you, Pastor Rowe, for that. Appreciate it. I'm going to ask Reverend Blanks to kind of deep dive into what we talked about, partnership and collaborating between the school district and the places of worship. What does that look like in New Britain?
Yes, thank you for having us tonight in this conversation. I have to start off and stand up my speech with these words. When I was a freshman in college, The first hard literature that I read was a book written by Dr. Carter G. Woodson titled The Miseducation of the Negro. And I want you all to hear the words that he said, and hopefully this will kind of help shape the partnership piece. He says, when you control a man's thinking, you do not have to worry about his actions. You do not have to tell him to stand here or go yonder. He will find his proper place and will stay in it. You do not need to send him to the back door. He will go without being told. In fact, if there is no back door, he will cut one out for his special benefit. The reason that Dr. Carter said that, he says, because his education makes it necessary. His education makes it necessary. I'm privileged to pastor in a historic denomination, 200-year plus old church, the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church, who stands on the shoulders of people like Frederick Douglass, Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, who have always had social justice issues at the forefront, who have always fought for equality and equity, who have always ensured that the community was being developed by the struggle in which the people of color were faced and felt. And here we are again, trying to bridge the gap with this social justice piece and with equity and opportunity. But that's it. When you think about it, that's just what social justice issues are. People fighting, right, for opportunities, fighting to have the same privilege and the same right. And a partnership with the houses of worship and with the school districts, the good news is it just didn't start tonight, because houses of worship has always been an important element in the development and the movement of ensuring that people have a fair shot. Whenever we worship, it is our goal to push people to become better. It is our goal to push people to see the best, to see the worth, to see individuals as to who they are. But as Pastor Santiago said, it is really the most segregated time. So if worship time is segregated, you have to wonder, what is school time as well? Somewhat segregated. Students sometimes sit here, sit there, congregate, and really the partnership that we have to develop starts with a real, true relationship, a relationship of trust that houses of worship has the best interest with those in the school district, because we're all trying to shape the same mindset, the same individual. But the reality of it is, and I was thinking, one reason that I knew that I was going to even marry my wife was after a long day. We were in Charlotte and we both were in the school system. I had a terrible day, so I was just ready to go. I hit 85 on my way home, and she called me and said these words, and I'll never forget. She said, "Sam, I have a student here with me still, but I've got to make sure and that I get her and her mother and her two brothers to the shelter before 5 o'clock. And she says to me, well, can you come back and help me make sure that we get this family to the shelter before 5? And I thought about that last night and into the day. There's people who are depending on us, but we got to get them there before a certain time, right? We got to help make sure that that they have an opportunity before it's too late, that the school district is doing all that it can, that houses of worship is doing all that it can to ensure that diversity is truly the top of the agenda, and inclusion is also a part of it, and making sure that individuals who does not look like us feel like that they have a partner who has their best interests at heart. I could go on and on, but I'll stop there. But that's where I wanted to kind of framework that, because that's so key. That's so key.
Thank you, Reverend Blanks. I was taking some notes for all of you, so I appreciate that. I'm now going to turn it over to Reverend Barger to share some thoughts on your end in terms of what does the partnership and collaboration look like between the houses of worship and the school district.
I want to say good evening to everyone, and so grateful for this opportunity from Dr. Sanders, and I think it's also, I don't have, for lack of a better word, brave for the superintendent of schools to begin to develop this kind of idea where collaboration, especially with the church and the mosque and the various different places of worship, which I really think is key. It's so important that we understand all these different dynamics and bring, and as has been already stated, bring these different pieces together, because it can't just stop at the church. I think that's a great place to start, but I think other entities in the city of New Britain have to be brought into this conversation as well. And I'll say for myself that I'm a retired teacher. I taught for 38 years in public school systems. In Meriden, Connecticut, I taught for 36 years. And the last 2 years I taught in Southington. And anybody that knows anything about those two cities knows that they're, Meriden is very diverse, just like New Britain. But in Southington, it's pretty much, I would say 98% white and quite different. And those two experiences, gave me a good perspective for this conversation that we're having here tonight. And, I will say this, when I became the president of the Black Ministerial Alliance, I just felt it was really important for, our organization to do whatever it could to help out with the educational system here in New Britain. And I say that only because, you hear all these nightmare stories about how low New Britain is considered in the educational department. And knowing that, I believe I have some background and some skills that I think could help. I went to the high school last year around this time. It was just before the pandemic hit. And I was talking to the principal there and sharing with him, that I had some skills that I thought might be able to help out, because I'd heard that there were multiple fights, it was in the paper and all this kind of stuff. And, he was very receptive to some of the things we were talking about. And then the pandemic hit, so that kind of shut those conversations down. But I really truly believe that there can be and should be a connection to from the public schools to the churches, because there are families who attend my church who also are in those schools, in the school system. So when I show up to some of the students when they have their Christmas plays or their periodically I'll go to football games or basketball games. I can see some of the students there that I know saying, hey, that's my pastor. And as a result of that, you establish what some have already been talking about in terms of relationships. And those relationships, even though they may be simple, on the surface, they go much deeper because, when a student acts out, just imagine, you reaching out and touching the lives of, of those students that are involved. If there's a fight, and let's just say that the principal gets on the phone and calls one of the religious leaders, or if the principal knows that one of the students attends a certain church, and they can call that pastor to help intervene. To me, it speaks volumes to what can possibly happen. Now, having said all that, teaching for so long, I used to get quite a few. I used to get into quite a few conversations with other teachers, white teachers, who used to say to me, Gervais, how do you handle this one? Or, I'm having so much trouble with this one. And one of the things that I tried to share with them is that, one of the things I use, I would always, ask kids, what kinds of things they were interested in. And I would go to the plays. I would go to, their various games, soccer games and things of that nature. And, when you show up at one of those events, I'm telling you right now, it changes the whole dynamic between you and that student. Because now that student knows that that you care for them. And, it's one thing to talk about, caring for a student or, and their education. But it's a whole nother thing when you involve yourself in the life of that child. Because now that child says, hey, Mr. Barger came to my game. And this is the conversation they may be having in their mind. So I know he's talking the talk and walking the walk, so that there's no doubt in my mind that this man cares about me. And when you have that relationship being built on that level, that word gets spread around. Kids talk about those kinds of things. Mr. Barger was at the game. He came to the soccer game. He was cheering for me. Matter of fact, he embarrassed me. He was calling my name. And, the kids love that. And now you have the foundation being built for something that is much deeper. Now I can reach that kid. Now I can say to that kid in my class, this is the expectation I have for you. And when I talk to my students about, where they're going and what they want to achieve in their lives, now they know for sure that Mr. Barger truly cares. And there's going to be a greater tendency for them now to want to listen to the lesson so I can get through to them. And, I really truly believe that, teachers need to tap into that kind of ideal, that kind of idea that, just being in the classroom is one aspect of me teaching. But me involving myself in the lives of those children on a different level is a whole nother aspect that I think sometimes gets lost. Because, when 2:30 hits or when 3:30 hits, that teacher wants to bolt to the door. And just like that example that Pastor Blanks was sharing with us a little while ago about, his wife wanting to make sure that child got to wherever it is that they needed to get to, the shelter, that speaks volumes about, the care that it really takes to make sure that things happen, on a different level. And, speaking about race, I'm done.
Reverend Barger, I didn't know you. Well, no, you're not done. We do have one more panelist. I do want to make sure he gets his 5 minutes in, because I also want to allow for Q&A. But I love your story though about connecting with the students in terms of them knowing you, because one of the things I wrote down was the places of houses of worship being an extension for the school district, being a village. So we all know the saying, it takes a village. And with everything happening in the world and with our students, that this extension and this added layer of a village and support for the students and for the families and working with the school district, this is how we can have this partnership and relationship between the places and houses of worship with the school district. So I thank you for mentioning the connection with students, as you know, so again, the sort of a kind of accountability, if you will. So last but not least, in terms of our panelists, I do want to bring on Ibrahim Al-Suraymi. And I hope I said it correctly. I called him today to make sure I could get the correct pronunciation. I wanted to be clear. So thank you so much for being with us today. And, you know, again, just kind of adding on to what we've already discussed. We've talked about partnerships. We've talked about the makeup of our community, you know, the diversity that we have in terms of, you know, ethnicity and those of worship and languages and things of that nature. So with everything else that has been shared, from your perspective, how do you see the school district and those of you who we call like our faith-based leaders working with the school district to have, you know, have the conversation around equity, have conversations around social justice, and things of that nature?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me tonight. And I'm grateful to the New Britain School District and to the organizers, everyone by his name. Certainly, the aspect that we discussed tonight is a very significant matters that no one, in my opinion, can even live in any society without establishing and practicing these matters. And first of all, I would like to mention that the church, synagogue, mosque have a very significant role. And every one of us here, he or she belong to a certain faith, whether we are a Muslim or Christian or a Jewish, or if we follow up, and that's my opinion, if we check out, if you go to our transcript, whether it's the Quran or Torah or Bible, we will figure out the main reason behind each and every messenger, whether he Moses or Jesus or Muhammad or Jacob, not only to show us or to establish the rituals, actually based on the Quran, and I believe also the Bible and Torah. If we follow up those messengers, one of the main job that they have done, that they came down. Allah, God, you know, maybe you know this term. In Arabic we say God means Allah. Allah sent every one of his messengers. Moses, he sent him to clear out oppression and to establish justice. And Jesus, he fought and he suffered for the sake of justice. Jacob and every single one. So, in my opinion, the leaders of the faith, they have the same job. So, definitely, we don't have the executive authority to, you know, enforce the people to follow our guidance or instructions. But our job is mainly to raise the awareness, that's first, and also to change the perceptions. We have seen most recently there are a lot of misperceptions that, you know, in the communities, bigotry after decades came back. There are a lot of things that should get us together, should bring all the faiths together. And I you know, actually I prepared for different, since the question, they change all what I already prepared, which is I was concluded. I mean, I try to get some quotes from the Quran regarding the justice and equity. But definitely, we here tonight to declare that we are in one ship, and this ship sometimes will experience risk. And definitely to maintain this ship and to protect this ship is not an individual job. It pushes us hardly and deeply to get together, because I believe the more there is a risk for our dignity, for against our freedom, against our social justice, equity, the more that we should strive and the more we should get together. So definitely, there are a lot of things that push us to get together, and I appreciate it, for having me tonight. Maybe this is the first one. I had the opportunity to meet with some of you, and I visited some of the pastors. But honestly, it's true that I admit that we don't have enough from Islamic Center. We don't have enough communication and enough how can we say, collaboration, so we can do together. But we try to do that. We try to to engage together and to involve with any social matters. But again, the role of our centers, again, to outreach and approach our communities, to let them know that we live in the same ship, as I mentioned earlier. And if something happened to anyone today, it may happen to someone else tomorrow. And last year, in 2016, believe me, I was very, I had a very deep emotion. If you heard, when in 2016, when Donald Trump produced the executive order for Muslim ban, and I saw the engagement. I saw how the community get together and stand and say no for hate, no for bigotry, no for, we should stand for justice. So definitely we need to stand again. We need to get together, because I believe no matter to whom we belong to, everyone has his own rituals and cultures and to practice his own faith. But what gather us more than what divide us? We have a common values, and I believe these values, it's a human need before it is a faith statement. Justice, equity, diversity. Islam basically, and my belief also. I want to end this because again, I said I avoided all what I prepared before. So Islam and all our religion, if we follow up all the rituals, all the instructions and regulations, we will figure out, whether from the Bible or from the Quran or from the Torah, ultimately the main goal beyond each and every single, instruction, we will figure out the human being is the main focus. The human being the human being is all the rituals surrounding around how the human being can live peacefully. How can we live in peace and dignity, and how we give everyone his freedom how we can achieve, the aspect, the social value in the community. And I think, hopefully I answer the question, which is what's the main goal. Again, we have a lot of jobs that we should do, but hopefully soon, or we will kind of work together and we can collaborate and cooperate together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ibrahim. I appreciate that. That was great. We have about 14 minutes left, and I don't know if we have any questions from those watching at home out in the virtual world. But I want to just kind of piggyback quickly on what was just said, because I think it's really important. You all, each of you here, each of you on the panel, you are the messenger. You are a messenger for not only the place of worship that you represent, but a messenger for our community. So as that messenger, how can we, again, and I think Ibrahim hit it on point, because he said, we did this before, we've come together before, and we know we can do it again. And I think the strong message is, how do we declare a partnership? We know we won't solve that tonight. And it sounds like to me that there needs to be a follow-up. The superintendent is watching that. We want to, there should probably be a part 2, if you will, to this conversation on, okay, we've talked about it, we've discussed it, we know that we can do it. The next steps, which is something I always, whenever there's a conversation I'm in, I always end it with, what are our next steps? Because it's one thing to have a conversation, but there's another thing to take action. And so from tonight, it sounds like everyone here is ready to take action with how we can partner, how the places and houses of worship can partner and collaborate with the school district and with the community. And even as Reverend Barger said, with others who were not here today, how can we as a whole, as a community, as a city, collaborate and have this conversation on around equity? So I do want to, I don't know if there are questions from the audience. I saw a comment from Paulette Fox, who we know is the executive director of OIC here in New Britain, who was commenting when Ibrahim was speaking about the Muslim community. So we appreciate her watching. What I'd like to do if we don't have any questions, I wanted to ask everyone just sort of like a 1-minute wrap up based on what you've heard tonight in 1 minute, please. Because again, the thing with these, it's hard to do this in an hour. When I saw 1 hour, I was like, ugh, 5 people who get up on a weekly basis and talk to a lot of people. Whew, that's hard. 5 minutes. That's just their introduction. So I thank everyone for just really thinking about the question, thinking about your personal experience, both just in your personal lives and as a reverend or pastor or leader in your faith, to share this tonight. So just maybe each of you do a 1 minute. We'll see if there is a question, with a couple of minutes at the end. Just sort of a wrap up. What are you thinking from what you've heard tonight? And I'll start, I'm going off my screen. I'll start with Reverend Blanks and work my way down.
Yes, thank you. I'm very hopeful. I do believe that this is an amazing opportunity for our faith community to continue to talk and to really make sure that, because I do believe that we have the support of the school district. Otherwise, I don't think we would be here tonight, that really want to make the investment in ensuring that our houses of worship are part of the movement in bringing about change, social justice change, radical changes that will help impact the lives of the students, in which not only that the schools serve, but that we serve also.
Thank you. And I noted that you mentioned Carter G. Woodson. For those of you watching at home, he's also was a member of Phi Beta Sigma. So I peeped that. I'm going to ask Pastor Rowe, you have any thoughts? Any closing thoughts?
I focused in my remarks on building relationships, and I really heard that in what every speaker said, that relationships are key. And And one of the things that also is clear is that those are built one at a time. I mean, it's a movement that is built one step at a time, one relationship at a time. And I think that has an amazing impact. So I think sometimes churches, we feel overwhelmed by all the things that we are called to do and want to do. And we have our own struggles in these days when church is not the main thing anymore on Sunday in our society. But to recognize that small steps, individual relationships that we build in partnership with the schools, in partnership with one another, make a difference. And so we should dig in and do it.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Reverend Santiago, what are your closing thoughts?
Just one small sentence here. The path to equity is through walls in New Britain. And so if we're willing to take risk, break through these walls, not come together when there's a crisis, but establish a presence. And I enjoyed very much Imam's comments regarding the fact that all of our faith systems come down to one thing, relationships. If we're able to manage relationships, then there's a number of ills that we can cancel. For example, the school to prison pipeline. I see every single day inmates who made a mistake when they were young, and today they're in prison for 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years. Mm-hmm. And my question is, where were the pastoral care providers? Because that would have done major impact. And I'm not only saying to the students, because there are teachers that are hurting, and there are school administrators that are hurting. And if we come together, I think that some of these challenges can be overtaken. And so if we're willing to break through these walls, I think we should. And I am curious to kind of discern where the school is coming from. I think that all of us here have expressed our desire to do something, to partner with the school. We know that partnering with each other, it's important, but all we can do on our own is to speak truth to power, and hopefully those words go beyond the walls. If we had other alliances that we can come together, beneficial, duly beneficial, I think New Britain can be a better place.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Reverend Barger, before I get to you, there is a question, and I see the superintendent join us, and maybe she can answer this question that was asked. Is the school district open to allowing houses of worship to use, to use its facilities, perhaps to provide community programs for our students? So is the school district open to allowing houses of worship to use its facilities and perhaps to provide community programs for our students?
I am a huge proponent of out of school time learning. And we open our buildings to people who want to work with our students in small groups, from you name it. And we entertain all ideas if we're going to work with small groups of kids. So the answer to that is, please reach out. We'll have that discussion. But yes, we are. Yeah, I'll leave it there for now because I don't want to take up too much time.
Okay, no problem. And that there's another question. I want to make sure I didn't miss it. I'm going through the chat now in terms of, someone said there were two questions. So there's a question here from Anne Marie Mancini. She's an elementary teacher in the district. She, along with many of her colleagues, have reflected on equity and diversity. This reflection led them to purchasing books for their classroom libraries that have characters that looks like their students. How can this collaboration with the faith community support them in their journey to be more aware, reflective in their practice, and in the content that they teach? Would anyone like to answer that?
Let me just take a stab at that.
Okay, I did see. Okay, and I saw Reverend Barger have his hand up too, but yep.
Okay, I yield.
Oh, okay, go ahead, Reverend Barger. And I'll come back to you, Reverend Santiago. Reverend Barger, you're muted.
Oh boy.
There you go. Now we hear you.
I mute myself, did I?
No, you're good.
Okay. I did want to be able to give my final comment before the hour was up. And it kind of plays right into this question anyway. And, you know, when I was talking to Dr. Sanders about this program of equity, you know, she spoke about this opportunity that we may have, and that I think should, you know, be fostered, where people of color, and, you know, we can probably start with the faith-based community, have this opportunity to speak to teachers, predominantly who are white, about equity, what that means, what racism is. Because I think unless you begin to talk to someone who has dealt with these issues, I think it's really hard for, you know, let's say, for example, a white person who has never dealt with racism to define what that means. And not just to define it, you know, talk about ways to overcome it. And I think that's where this conversation comes into play. And unless we begin to talk about racism, then it's never going to go away. And, you know, we have this ability to chip away at this ism that I think has plagued us for a long time. And, you know, equity is important. And until we all get to the place where we're willing to sit down at the table and talk about these things, then I think that we're going to have a real difficult time trying to change it. And so with that being said, let's begin to talk. Let this not be the last evening that we, you know, come together. You know, let us continue to build on this so that, you know, we have this forum whereby we can help one another. And, you know, and I think there's a huge piece, because, you know, teachers have to go to school for a long time, and you have to get, you know, your 30 hours after your, you know, bachelor's degree and all that kind of stuff. And with all that, you say, well, you know, when will we have time to do this? And we have to make time. And we have to make sure that we make ourselves available. We can't just talk about it and then just leave it, you know, let this be the only time that we talk about this for the rest of the year. You know, call us in. I'm willing. And I think everybody here is willing. Let's make this happen. Amen.
Amen. Sounds like Reverend Barger is ready to chair that committee. You know, one thing I do before I leave is like, so if we going to do next steps, we also going to give out assignments and tasks. So I know the superintendent's like, yes. So I'm trying to see if was there someone, I think we have a limited number of people that can be on here. I want to make sure everyone had an opportunity to give any closing remarks or thoughts. But I think this was a great conversation. It wasn't, I'm sure, not the first conversation, but it's one of many conversations that I'm sure that will continue as we are, again, just into the second month of the year of a new year. We're still in a pandemic. Families are still struggling. I was just volunteering at Food Share yesterday, where the lines are still long. So there's no a snap of a finger where things have changed after January 20th. Families are still having challenges, both with finances, with what's happening just in their communities and things of that nature. So this is where we can come together to provide supports for students and families. The places of worship, the houses of worship, the clergy, the faith-based leaders. This is where you all can come together and provide additional support for those students and families and on the road to equity. so that we're not, again, just saying that we're diverse, but we're actually having this inclusive conversation about how diverse we are and practicing what we preach. So I just want to thank, again, the superintendent and Dr. Sanders for this opportunity to serve as a moderator. I want to thank the fabulous panelists. You all did a wonderful job. We could go on for another hour because, again, this conversation is much needed. And so with that, I will turn it back over to Dr. Sanders.
Great. Thank you. And I definitely appreciate each of you for entering our space today, speaking your truth. Understanding that the journey that we are on, and it is a journey, it's a self-reflective journey. It's how you enter this space as a person of color or a person who's not of color, because our moral imperative is our children and our community. And that's how I have been and will always be led through the faith in my God that I believe in to do this work. And so each of you today have deposited something in my spirit that will continue to support me on this journey. That will be, like Pastor Santiago said, we're going to be breaking down some walls. We're going to be taking risks. We may make some people upset because we're leaning into who we are as people to counter so many of the things that we see each and every day that plagues our children, that plagues that little Black girl, myself, who was the only Black girl in her second grade class, and feeling as if I was a nothing. I will never rest because I don't want another little kid to experience that feeling that I felt and I still remember. So this will not be the first time we get together. This is definitely a partnership that is near and dear to my heart for a variety of different reasons. And so thank you all, because now I have another new friend or two. Pastor Santiago, you're not going anywhere. We're going to lean into this one together. You can ask the others on the phone. I will call you for prayer. I will email you because we're in this together. And I will turn it over to Superintendent for final thoughts. Oh, yeah.
It's very hard to follow everything that was spoken tonight. And I always go back to what are next steps, right? That's really important to me. Two things that I want to speak to as a white woman coming from privilege, to say be patient with us. We are trying really hard to learn the right way, to do the right thing, right? I'm not speaking for everyone, I'm speaking for myself. This is a journey. I'm on this journey alongside everyone. It's an opportunity. We have an opportunity now. And we can't turn our cameras off tonight and not get back together. The people here on the camera to say, so what are the steps? I have to thank some of our teachers for being on here. Listening to us, talking with us, talking together, it is a huge first step. And it is about relationships. It's about adult relationships, feeling safe in a space. And when we feel safe, then we can then turn and make our students feel safe. Right? So it is. Everything you said, I wrote down so much that I'm looking at my notes, they're all over, but I do believe we are on the same ship, right? It is a large ship. We have to break down some of these walls because there's a lot of walls on the ship, but we have to do this work together, right? And we have to accept each other for our flaws, good and bad, and what we're bringing to the table. But we have to make these changes. So for me, next steps are to have Dr. Sanders just set up a time where we can talk, because I do think, all of your points, it would be wonderful to have outside of our school district people to sit and talk with, not just me and Dr. Sanders, but we've got 1,800 staff members that care, right? And we all care, and we know we're not doing it perfectly. So let's get better. Let's get better. I can't thank you enough. It was wonderful.
Thank you. So that concludes our first opportunity together. And as Superintendent said, I have your contact information. I will definitely be reaching out to set up our next event together. alongside superintendent and some of our other partners, because this is something that we have to do together. And I have a vision in my head, and I'll need prayers to make sure that it happens. And powerful people on this forum. So that again is just great for me to know. So I thank you so very much. Enjoy your night. And again, thank you, because we know that you all are very, very, very busy, but definitely appreciate the time that you took for us this evening. Thank you.